This is apropos. EU ministers are tonight calling for stronger coordination on gas storage to avoid price spikes as the bloc's energy commissioner warns that the consequences of the war in the Middle East will not be short-lived. But they say Europe's wider energy supply remains relatively safeguarded from the impact of the conflict. Brussels is preparing what's being described as a toolbox of measures for member states to deal with the consequences of the war, as Monty Francis reports.
With prices at the pump soaring across Europe, EU energy ministers met in a video conference Tuesday, with the European Commission urging member states to make timely and coordinated preparations to keep energy prices under control. Some countries have already acted. Poland, for example, has decided to subsidize the cost of gas. As a result, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said his government was watching out for so-called fuel tourism, or people coming over the border to buy cheaper gas.
We're keeping an eye on the situation. For the time being, we're not seeing any mass tourism, particularly from the West, in the form of this fuel tourism. But there's no doubt that it will happen.
Poland's neighbor, Germany, is among a large group of EU nations that have for now decided against subsidizing energy prices. In France, the government has announced relief for the transport, farming and fishing industries, as well as help for low-income families to pay their energy bills. And Italy has set aside money to cut some taxes on fuel, but it's had little effect on overall energy costs. Economists say countries in Europe and all over the world are facing a tough challenge because using public money to ease prices provides a false sense of security when it comes to supply and demand, while higher energy costs can boost inflation and slow economic growth.
The cost of, operation for any business, power generation costs globally as well going up. So that affects, businesses and bottom lines. It potentially could lead to, job losses down the line and really teetering on the edge of an economic recession.
At a meeting of G7 countries Monday, which includes the US, Canada, Britain, and Japan, as well as Germany, France, and Italy, energy ministers struggled to find a middle ground, vowing to stabilize energy prices, but worried that too much public spending to offset those costs could trigger another kind of financial crisis.
Well, for more, we're joined now by Francesco Sassi, Assistant Professor at the Department of Political Science at the University of Oslo. Thanks so much, Professor, for being with us on the programme this evening. Let's start with this so-called toolbox of new measures that the EU is going to be rolling out. We know that it's going to include proposals on lowering tax rates for electricity and grid tariffs. But what exactly needs to be done at this point to help Europeans and people outside the EU as well deal with this current crisis?
Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation and be here tonight with you. Let me begin with some honest truth. And the EU has not been so sincere with the population. We are facing indeed the largest supply disruption of oil in the oil market coming from the Middle East right now. We have never seen such a disruption in the history of energy markets. And the EU is not really communicating this to the population, is preparing some vague measures and this toolbox of reduced prices, reduced taxes, on electricity and other kinds of energy products. But the real problem is that the more the crisis will go on, the more severe these measures will be needed to be implemented at the EU level, but also at the national level. And what is really concerning here is that national governments will, because of the consequences of the crisis, start to unilaterally take action and subsidize energy consumption, or on the other hand, act politically to secure energy supplies. And this will inevitably increase the cost of natural gas and oil in Europe and for European consumers.
Yeah, because there's no one-size-fits-all solution, so to speak, here, is there, given the various energy needs and other issues in all of the various EU countries, ranging from the situation here in France to Eastern Europe to Ireland and the UK? It's very hard to roll out measures that are going to suit every country.
Absolutely, you're right. There's no unique measure to end this energy supply crisis because the crisis originate in the Middle East, in the Persian Gulf, in the conflict between the U.S., Israel on one hand, and Iran on the other, but also how Iran and the blockade of Hormuz is affecting the Gulf, the Persian Gulf energy exporters, Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Some of these countries are the largest oil and natural gas and LNG exporters in the world. So Europe also should acknowledge the fact that this crisis has been really and dangerously affecting the energy security, mostly of Asian countries. We are talking about China, we are talking about Japan, South Korea, but also we are talking about South and Southeast Asia countries like Pakistan, India, Thailand, Malaysia. These countries are directly and today have been affected by the consequences of this energy crisis. And we are already seeing disruptions on a large scale of energy supplies in these countries. And these countries are already taking steps way more severe than any other European countries is undertaking right now. It should be also understood that this crisis cannot be simply avoided by the EU. Europe will suffer the long wave consequences of what is happening right now in Asia, delayed by weeks, days, maybe months, but in the end, what is happening in Asia will also affect European consumers and suppliers.
And just how serious do you think this could get? You've said in the past that we might be in the middle of what you've described as a final breakdown of the international energy order as we know it.
Indeed, because the free flow of energy supplies is one of the basic law of international energy markets. But what we are observing right now is that in the wake of the embargo and sanctions against Russian natural gas and oil supplies and coal to Europe and to other G7 countries, we are today seeing the physical disruption of energy supplies applied by one country, just one country, Iran, de facto controlling between 15 and 20% of global oil and natural gas supplies and natural gas flows and oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz. To that, we also need to understand that the Houthis in the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait could be also affecting other energy flows in that area. So the conflict is actually expanding, and the energy flows affected by this energy and political and geopolitical crisis are also increasing and not decreasing. Again, the free flow of energy markets stands as one of the basic role of international markets and the current energy order. But if Hormuz is closed for the medium or even the long term, we will see the breakdown of international energy order. And we will see also maybe new alliances, new axes created based on energy necessities, the one of energy exporters and the one of energy importers.
And many European leaders have also said over the past few weeks that the only country that's really benefiting from the current situation is Russia. So do you think that Europe is going to actually have to increase its reliance on Moscow, even though it's been trying to wean itself off Russian imports?
Yes, this is the ultimate paradox for Europe, because it is constrained by the situation, and the soonest the European governments will admit that they are facing an energy crisis of global and unprecedented term, the better will be for European governments and also the EU to somehow organize a coordinated response, which also include accounting for the available energy supplies alternative to what was flowing from the Persian Gulf. Many countries in Asia right now, allies of the US, are reconsidering the purchase of Russian energy supplies. This is the last choice for European countries, but the available alternatives are diminishing day by day. And this is also a consequence of the urgency that these Asian countries are feeling on themselves, and the perception of this energy insecurity that's increasing day by day, seeing that the negotiations between the US and Iran are not gaining any actual any actual result of energy flows through the Strait of Hormuz.
Finally, Francesco, do you think that consumers here in Europe should be reassured by what they're hearing coming from Brussels tonight?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think European policymakers need to be honest with European the population, the industries, consumer households. This is a serious energy crisis that builds on the 2022 energy crisis between Europe and Russia. But the gravitation center, the pivotal center of this crisis is in Asia, but we cannot deflect this crisis. This will inevitably also impact European energy security.
Francesco Sassi, thanks so much for being with us on the programme. That's Francesco Sassi, Assistant Professor at the Department of Political Science at the University of Oslo. Well, that is it.